The year was 1865, and the war was over, but the frontier had never learned the meaning of peace. Dust hung in the air like a held breath, clinging to boots, coats, and sins that no sermon could wash away. In the center of Dry Creek, a town built too fast and loved too little, a single gunshot cracked the afternoon open. Horses screamed. Windows shattered. Men scattered like startled birds, each one suddenly remembering something he had forgotten to fear. He stood in the street when it happened, a tall man with shoulders pulled tight against the world, his dark hair tied back at the nape of his neck. Blood, soaked through the linen, wrapped around his forearm, fresh and angry, but he did not look at it. Pain was an old companion. What caught his attention was the sound of boots running behind him and the knowledge, sharp and certain, that this town had decided to kill him. Another shot rang out, with splintered near his feet. He moved then, fast and controlled, slipping between a feed store and the trading post as smoke rolled from the doorway behind him. Inside, the air was thick with gunpowder and sweat. A man collapsed near the counter, eyes wide, surprise frozen on his face. No time to mourn. No time to pray. The frontier allowed neither. He reached for the back door, but it burst inward before his hand touched the latch. A woman stood there, breathless, her eyes locked on his wounded arm. She was younger than he expected, dressed in plain earth-tone cloth, her hair pulled back in a practical braid. Fear flickered across her face, then resolve hardened it. "This way," she said, already moving. They ran together, pushed by the roar of anger behind them. Outside, sunlight burned his eyes as they crossed an alley choked with refuse and broken crates. He stumbled, the wound in his arm tearing open again, warm blood sliding down his skin. She caught him without hesitation, her grip stronger than it looked. "Stay on your feet," she said. It was not a plea. It was an order. They burst into the street at the far end of town as another body hit the dirt behind them, a man he recognized too late. A friend once. A warning now. The sight punched the air from his lungs, but the woman pulled him onward, toward a waiting horse tied near a boarded saloon. Shots followed. One grazed his shoulder. Another struck the hitching post. He shoved her up first, then swung himself into the saddle, teeth clenched as pain flared white and blinding. The horse bolted at the sound of gunfire, hooves pounding the earth as Dry Creek fell away behind them. They did not slow until the town was a smear of gray on the horizon. When the horse finally faltered, he slipped sideways and hit the ground hard. The sky spun. Blood soaked the dirt beneath him. He expected her to leave. It would have been the sensible thing, the safe thing. She knelt beside him instead. Her hands shook as she pressed cloth to his arm, but her voice was steady. "You're not dying," she said, as if speaking it aloud could make it true. He laughed, once a dry, broken sound. "You don't know that." "I know you're breathing," she replied, "and I know I won't let them take you." As she worked, he felt the weight of memories settle in. Dry Creek was not the first town to turn on him. He had seen it before. The way fear curdled into violence when men decided blame was easier than mercy. He had come here hoping to disappear, to trade his name for silence, but the past had followed him, wearing new faces and old hatred. Somewhere behind them, someone would be counting the dead and deciding his life was worth a price. She tied the bandage tight, jaw clenched, then leaned back on her heels, exhaustion softening her features. "They shot my brother this morning," she said, quietly. "Called him a thief. He wasn't. He just stood in the wrong place." Her eyes lifted to his, shining but unbroken. "I wasn't going to watch it happen again." He searched for words and found none that fit. What he felt was heavier than gratitude and sharper than fear. It was the knowledge that her decision had braided their fates together, tight and unyielding. The West did not forgive such bonds. It tested them, broke them, sometimes buried them beneath unmarked ground. He wondered how long before the land demanded its payment from both of them. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying, and she rose with him, steadying his weight, as if it were already her burden to share. For a moment, they stood in silence, listening to the wind sweep across the grass, carrying with it the smell of dust and distant smoke. Somewhere, a crow cried out, harsh and lonely. The sky darkened at its edges, clouds bruised with the promise of night. He did not know her name yet, but he felt the shape of it waiting somewhere ahead, like a place on a map marked only by hope. Whatever lay beyond the next ridge would try to tear them apart. He could feel it, but for the first time in years he did not face it alone. Voices carried on the wind, riders searching, the world closing in again. He forced himself upright, leaning heavily on her shoulder. "If you stay," he said, "they'll come for you too." She met his gaze, unflinching. "They already have." Together, they turned toward the open land, the endless, unforgiving west stretching before them, and stepped into it as the sun dipped low, sealing their choice in blood and dust. They rode until the land flattened into a vast, breathing emptiness, the town's dust giving way to pale grass that whispered under the wind. Night came quick, sharp with cold, and when the horse could go no farther, they dismounted beside a shallow draw. He sagged, breath ragged, and she guided him down, easing his weight as if she had practiced this kind of care all her life. The sky bruised purple. Stars pricked through. Somewhere coyotes laughed. She built a fire with hands grown sure by necessity. Sparks leapt. He watched, shivering, thinking how strange it was to feel watched over by someone whose name he still did not know. When the flames steadied, she knelt and unwound the bandage. Blood had soaked through again. He hissed. She did not apologize. She pressed cloth, firm and clean. "Hold still," she said. "If it festers, you won't outrun anyone." He smiled thinly. Wasn't planning on outrunning much of anything. Her eyes lifted, searching his face. "You plan on living?" It was not a question. He nodded, surprised by the simple stubbornness of the word. Living had felt optional for a long time. She cleaned the wound, poured a sting that made his vision spark, and bound it tight. When she finished, her hands trembled. She tucked them into her sleeves until they stopped. They ate in silence, hard bread and dried meat softened by the fire's heat. The night pressed close. He felt the pull to speak and resisted, knowing that speech invited memory. The frontier did not need more ghosts, but she spoke first, voice low, steady. "My name's Eliza," she said. "I was heading east when Dry Creek decided otherwise." He considered the fire. "I'm called Jonah." "Called," she repeated. He met her gaze. "Names wear out." She accepted that, as she had accepted blood and gunfire, without fuss. Sleep came in scraps. He dreamed of rifles cracking, of a man's face falling backward into dust, of hands reaching that he could not catch. He woke, with a start to the sound of water, close and rushing. At dawn they reached a river, swollen and fast, brown with spring melt. The crossing was narrow, the banks slick. Jonah tested the current with a stick. It tore at him, hungry. Eliza swallowed. "We go back, they find us." "They'll find us anyway," he said. "This gives us a chance." They led the horse in, step by careful step. The water climbed his thighs, then his waist, tugging at the bandage. His arm burned. Eliza slipped on a stone and went under with a cry. Jonah lunged, caught her wrist, the force nearly wrenching his shoulder free. He planted his feet, teeth bared, and hauled. The current roared. The horse reared. For a breathless moment, the river tried to take them all. They reached the far bank soaked and shaking. Jonah collapsed, coughing, water pouring from his sleeves. Eliza knelt beside him, hands on his chest, counting his breaths until they steadied. When he opened his eyes, she laughed once, sharp with relief, then pressed her forehead to his. The contact startled them both. She pulled away, color rising in her cheeks. Tracks cut the mud behind them. Fresh, too many. They pushed on through brush and stone, hunger clawing. Near dusk, a low growl cut the air. Jonah reached for his pistol, found it gone, lost to the river. The animal showed itself in the half-light, a lean shadow with eyes like embers. Eliza stood her ground, lifting a burning branch. The beast circled. Jonah took a knife from his boot, stepping between them, arms screaming as he raised it. The animal lunged. Fire met fur. The knife flashed. The thing fled, wounded and furious, its cry tearing the dark. Jonah sagged. Eliza caught him. She pressed her face to his shoulder and breathed until the shaking stopped. They made camp high and hidden. As the fire settled, Jonah spoke into the quiet. He told her of the war, of orders followed and lives taken, of a boy with a letter in his pocket and blood on Jonah's hands. He told her how he had walked west thinking distance might clean him. Eliza listened, eyes bright, offering no absolution, no judgment. When he finished, she took his hand. "I don't need you clean," she said. "I need you here." Hooves thundered at dawn. Shots cracked. Jonah shoved Eliza behind a boulder as bullets chipped stone. He fired back with a knife and a stolen rifle from fallen man, moving despite the pain, choosing his shots with care. One rider fell. Another fled. Silence returned, broken by Jonah's breath and the wind. Eliza emerged, blood on her sleeve that was not hers. She touched his face, then his wound. "You stayed," she said. "So did you," he answered. They stood amid the wreckage of morning, knowing the hunt was not over, knowing also that something between them had hardened into resolve. They gathered what they could and turned toward the rising sun, bound together by choice and the promise of what waited ahead. They did not linger. Smoke from the shots would carry. Eliza found a canteen and forced him to drink, then tore her sleeve to reinforce the bandage. Her hands were steadier now, as if danger had taught them rhythm. Jonah watched her and felt a quiet shift inside. Trust, he realized, was not a leap, but small steps taken when retreat felt worse. They moved into cottonwoods, leaves whispering warning. From the ridge above, a figure watched, rifle resting easy, patience honed by pursuit. Jonah felt it then, a prickle between the shoulders, the old sense waking. He turned, scanning the horizon, and saw only light. Eliza followed his gaze. "They're still out there," she said. "Yes," he answered, "and they won't stop." She tightened her grip on his arm, not to hold him back, but to anchor them. Together they slipped into shade, carrying survival forward, unaware how close the next test stood. The land seemed to listen, waiting. They moved at dawn, the land opening before them like a challenge thrown down by God himself. Jonah felt every step in his arm, the wound stiff and angry, but he kept his pace steady. Pain was information. It told him he was alive, and alive meant he still had choices. Eliza walked beside him, rifle balanced across her forearms, eyes scanning the hills with a calm that had been forged, not given. Whatever fear she carried it quietly. By midday the air turned dry and thin. The cottonwoods fell away, replaced by open ground that offered no mercy. Jonah saw the riders before he heard them. Dark shapes cresting a distant rise, moving with the confidence of men who believed time was on their side. He stopped. Eliza followed his gaze and swore under her breath. "They won't stop," she said. "No," Jonah replied. "They never do." He led her toward a line of rocks cut deep by an old creek bed, the earth there broken and sharp. It was a place to make a stand or a grave. As they moved, Jonah's thoughts turned inward, dragged there by the approaching thunder of hooves. He had run from fights before. He had survived them. Survival, he knew now, was not the same as living. If he kept running, Eliza would bleed for it eventually. The thought settled his mind with terrible clarity. They reached the rocks as the first shot cracked the air. Stone burst inches from Jonah's head. He dropped, dragging Eliza down with him. Dust filled his mouth. He tasted iron. Eliza returned fire, her shot clean and controlled, forcing the riders to scatter. Jonah watched her in that moment and felt something close to awe. She was not fearless. She was resolute. The riders circled, spreading wide. Jonah counted them. 4, maybe 5. He checked the rifle, fingers slick with sweat. His arm trembled. He hated it for that. He shifted his grip, breathing through the pain, letting memory take over. War had taught him how to wait. A rider broke cover too soon. Jonah fired. The man fell hard, rolling his horse, bolting free. Another shot followed, grazing Jonah's shoulder. Eliza cried out, reaching for him, but he shook his head. "Stay focused," he said. "They want us desperate." Minutes stretched thin. The sun climbed. Sweat burned his eyes. When the next rush came, it was fast and violent. Hoofs pounded. Gunfire shattered the quiet. Jonah rose, firing twice, moving despite the scream in his arm. He felt a bullet tear through his coat, heat flaring, then fading. He did not stop. One rider leapt from his horse, charging with a knife. Eliza fired, missed. Jonah met the man head-on, blade flashing. They crashed together, breath and blood and fury tangled. Jonah drove the knife home and felt the resistance give. The man collapsed, weight dragging Jonah to his knees. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of his own breathing. When it cleared, only one rider remained. The man watched from a distance, measuring. Jonah met his gaze and understood. This was not about money. It was about finishing something that had begun long before Dry Creek. Jonah stepped forward, dropping his rifle. Eliza's hand caught his sleeve. "Don't," she whispered. "I have to," he said, "for both of us." The rider dismounted. They walked toward each other, slow, deliberate. The wind carried the smell of dust and blood. Jonah's arm hung useless now, soaked red. The man raised his gun. Jonah did not flinch. He spoke instead, voice steady. "You can end it here," he said, "or you can carry it with you. Same weight either way." The man hesitated. In that pause, Eliza fired. The shot rang clean. The rider fell. Silence crashed down, heavy and complete. Jonah sagged, the strength leaving him all at once. Eliza caught him, lowering him to the ground. She pressed her forehead to his, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on her face. "It's over," she said. Jonah laughed weakly. "It never is." She bound his wound again, hands gentle now, reverent. When she finished, she helped him sit. They watched the sun dip low, staining the land gold and red. The bodies lay still. The West took its due and moved on. Jonah closed his eyes, letting the quiet seep in. He thought of the man he had been, of the road behind him littered with names and faces. He opened his eyes and looked at Eliza. She was watching the horizon, chin lifted, unbroken. "I don't know what comes next," he said. She took his hand. "Neither do I. But I know this," she said. "We choose it." He squeezed her fingers, feeling the truth of it settle deep. The frontier had wounded him, carved him open, but it had not taken everything. As the light faded, they rose together and walked on, not toward safety, but toward something earned, the land stretching ahead, waiting to test them again. They did not hurry. Jonah leaned into Eliza's shoulder, each step a small victory claimed from the pain. Behind them, the wind moved through the grass, erasing tracks, softening the violence that had marked the ground. Ahead, the land rolled on in waves. They walked until the sky deepened to blue, until the first stars appeared like promises not yet tested. Jonah felt the weight of his past loosen, not gone, but shared. The West had tried to break him into something smaller, meaner, easier to bury. Instead, it had given him a reason to stand. When darkness finally claimed the land, they stopped and built another fire. The flames rose, casting their shadows intertwined against the earth. Jonah watched those shadows and understood that whatever came next would come hard. The frontier demanded payment in blood and will. This time, he was ready to pay it forward, not alone, but bound to the woman beside him, carrying scars, and walking into a future that had not yet decided whether it would spare them together.